Welcome to Canio's 2023 Moby-Dick Marathon. Marianne and I are pleased to have you here with us today. We hope you'll join us at other watches along the way. The marathon is a fundraiser for Canio's Cultural Cafe, our educational nonprofit, and there's information on how you can support us in the program that you received outside. Please be sure to come to our after party with the silent auction and sea shanties on Sunday at around 5 o'clock. It will be across the street at Judy Long's lawn. We will read short sections in various languages to evoke the multinational crew aboard the Pequod. We begin today with Denise Silva-Dennis from the Shinnecock Nation, who will give us some information about their whaleman's blessing.
Well, hello everyone.
Hello.
So my name is Denise Silva-Dennis, and I'm also called Wee TahMoe from the Shinnecock Nation. And this is I believe my second time here to do the beginning of the wonderful reading of Moby-Dick. And I would like to say in our language, Akwe Nintampak, which means hello friends. Denise Kwa Wee TahMoe Natisawis, those are my names. Silva-Dennis Nichapayawunk is my last name. Shinnecock Kwa Hasanamisco Nichashayawunk are my nations. And Shinnecock Nitap is where I live on Shinnecock. So all through my whole life, I always knew that we were from whaling people because my mother told me that. And she is where I derived from Shinnecock, and also through my husband later in my life, learning more about whalers. One of my first introductions was actually going to the Cooper whaling house over in Southampton as a small child. But all we learned about was a little bit about Shinnecock. Not too much, but it was mostly about this grand house. And so we're talking about women. We're focusing on women. And one of the things that we were taught was about the widow's wall. So that is a small structure on top of these grand houses. So that kind of tells you right from the start that this whole industry was so dangerous. You had to be brave. You had to have skills. You had to have money to invest. And the people who made the most money were the captains and the agents. And then they would send money, back to, hopefully, if there were no widows, if they made it back. So on Shinnecock, it was different. Shinnecock men did not make that much money at all from the whaling ventures. Sometimes they did. They did better than the people who were not whalers at all. But it's kind of a circumstance where the economics were very uneven. And then this goes through centuries and centuries of it being like one of the most important industries here on Eastern Long Island. And certainly Sag Harbor was one of the strongest here on Long Island with so many ships. So as I became an adult and just became more immersed in whaling, and it just seems like more and more and more, I keep being asked to either go to the whaling museum, further up the island, or talk about whales, or even the regalia that I have on today. You'll see that I have whales on it. Because I always knew that that was the most important thing that the men did. But what about the women? The women were at home, waiting, praying. And I know I didn't come here I missed the talk with Susan, who came in, but she talked about the women and what about their connection and why didn't they want to read Moby-Dick? Well, maybe it's because you don't really want to read about what you already know, the tragedy, and maybe it'd be upsetting. But then I know she also talked about religion in the original copies of Moby-Dick. and how it was important to talk about Job and different people in the Bible. And I know the women of Shinnecock were always known as a praying bunch of people. And as a matter of fact, on Shinnecock, we have the oldest mission church in the United States of America. So one of the first Bibles that was translated into our language helped us to start praying. Years later, after the whaling ships went through and oil was found in Pennsylvania, the gold rush happened out in California, whaling was not as important. But all that whole time, the women prayed, whether they prayed in the Algonquin language, through the Bible, or whether we had ceremonies, because we were known to have ceremonies using the fin and the tail of the whale. So as far as our relationship, the Shinnecock women's relationship to the whale, it was a being that we prayed to, and we were thankful for. So that was in direct conflict with the colonists who came, because they saw the whale as, they saw the men from Shinnecock going after the whale on the shorelines, brave in the wintertime to get that Atlantic right whale. And then they saw money signs, that oil can be used. But we never really thought of it that way. So in the early contracts, the Shinnecock people and the other Unkechaug and the Montaukett people, they weren't really thinking about getting a lot of money or a lot of gold or a lot of silver from it. That was just something for our survival. And that was the reverence there for the Shinnecock people through the ages. And it was called Padawa or Padawi. That was our name for getting those Atlantic right whales. And they came right into shore. So we said the prayers, we used the fin and the tail of the whale in our ceremonies. And then soon what happened, these things were outlawed, because it was like, to the colonists, we were looked at people who were like worshiping the devil. And that's why that mission church came to being on Shinnecock, because we had to be Christianized. We had to learn English and forget about your language. You don't need it anymore. And then there were also some sad things that happened with the whalers, whereas they went into debt because they were trying to get the goods from the company store. But if you did not get a whale, if you weren't successful in that hunt, it didn't matter if you were out there for months and months or years and years. You were not going to get paid. So that put a lot of people into generational poverty. And, still has ramifications of today. And then I was reading as I came here today, and I visited the Whaling Museum further up the island in Cold Spring Harbor, and I got these books, and it was called, one book was called about the sailing circle. And actually it's about all different women who were actually on ships, which I never knew about. So I'm learning as we go. I always believe in a lifelong learner. I'm a retired teacher. And then another one is called Living with Whales by Nancy Shoemaker. And she talks about different people of color, whether they were Portuguese or Shinnecock or Unkechaug, leading the way, Cape Verdean people, Mediterranean people. And I learned so much. I learned that back in that time, slavery was going on in this country. So if you didn't have a certificate that said that you were part of a whaling ship, you could be captured and put right back into slavery. So there's just so many things to learn and to share. Or even, and I have another book. This is out of Publish right now, publication. And this is called The Family Recollections of Beulah Shippen and Mabel Shippen Hatcher, Roots in the Shinnecock Indian Nation. And these were letters that went back and forth. So maybe along with the Moby-Dick stories and how we're connected and how this part of the United States is really where it began, with those beached whales. And then putting us today And what's happening with the whales? The whales are coming up on shore. One just came through the Shinnecock Canal. So what will we do to find out what is going on with these whales? Is it the wind turbines? Is it the ship strikes? But it's a good thing that we're learning about the history of whaling through Moby-Dick, because we all have a place in history now to see what we can do. What can we do to help those whales that were almost brought to extinction? We don't want to see them go into extinction again. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
You're
Stay here
welcome.
for a moment. I wanted you to sign this book
Okay.
at the beginning.